All right. Thank you so much for making some time to chat today.
Excited to
Just
do this.
yeah, just to get started, could you tell me a little bit about who you are and about the kind of work that you do, about your practice?
Sure. So my name is Rachlin. My pronouns are they and she. I'm a certified professional midwife and licensed midwife and lactation counselor here in Philly, Pennsylvania. And I serve kind of like Philadelphia, Southeast PA, and then all of South Jersey. And, my practice is part home birth. So I'm a home birth midwife and I help people give birth in like their living room or their bathroom or, hallway, like wherever. And then I also help queer folks get pregnant. So I specifically doing a home intrauterine insemination or home IUI. And then like kind of trying to build community with queer people who are trying to conceive, pregnant, have new babies, both through like teaching classes, like Beyond the Baster, which is like my favorite funnest class to take on like how to get pregnant when you lack sperm, and then also community events.
Awesome. That work is so important.
Mm-hmm.
What are you queering right now?
I think I'm constantly trying to queer birth work in the birth world. I think, yeah, pregnancy and birth and having new babies is like the most gendered experience in our society. And, I think I got into birth work from like a social justice, reproductive justice perspective. And what I kind of continue to find and like work around is that the way that the childbearing year is gendered really takes away people's agency and humanity in the process. And like, queer centered care is like individualized care that like calls people by their names and like treats them as respected
Mm,
individuals. And like everybody deserves that. And that's what I'm kind of trying to work for and like kind of build within like the birth community here in Philadelphia of like folks that are providing like queer centered care in all aspects of like, preconception, pregnancy, birth, and postpartum.
awesome. And what inspired you to do the work that you do?
I definitely got into it like through like kind of activism and social justice work. Like long before I got into birth, I was a labor organizer. And then yeah, like life situations came up and I was like, I want to learn how to support people. So I became a doula, and it was like this like switch flipped of like, oh, this is what I was supposed to be doing with my life. And birth just kind of had all the answers of like all the ways I saw like problems and like systems of oppression like coalescing, and I was like, oh, this is like where everything starts and this is where I want to work. But I felt like as a doula, like I was like a band-aid on a gaping wound. And the first time I went to a home birth, it was life changing because I was there as a doula. I've probably been a doula for about like 1 or 2 years at that point. And what I saw was like the midwife like worked around the needs of the person in labor. And that when you bend over to listen to the baby instead of like telling someone like, oh, we lost the baby, you need to get back in the bed, birth looks completely different. And I saw like agency, I saw empowerment in a way that and just a birth that was like fundamentally different than anything I'd ever seen in the hospital. And I was like, oh, that's what I need to be doing. And if I'm doing this at home and hospitals have to compete with this kind of care, they're going to behave better. And that kind of started off this long trajectory of, choosing to be a direct entry midwife. So I only trained exclusively with out of hospital birth, so home birth and birth center, and wanting to create, yeah, just like a different paradigm of like how we get to provide care that like restores choice and agency to families and ultimately creates competition for hospitals, so they have to change their practices to be more like family centered.
Yeah, I really appreciate the framing of that, both for what it is in and of itself and the uniqueness of out of hospital birth experiences, but also about how that is then like pushing change within the system.
Yeah, I think there's like lots of different ways that like, I think midwives are change agents in every part of society, and every society that exists. But like midwifery in the US is like particularly a mess. And like some folks choose to work within systems to try and create change. And like that was not the road for me. I was like, I want to work out, I want to create an alternative that isn't navigating like these same like systemic oppressions like in the ways that I'm having to provide care, that there are like a lot of limitations to out of hospital birth in the United States and like working outside the system. But for me, the benefits far outweigh the downsides. And I think, yeah, we can create all our own alternative that like better meets our needs.
And you've touched on this in all of your answers, but just to be like really explicit about it, how would you describe your support philosophy in the care that you provide?
I mean, I think for me, like being a midwife is about like showing up for this process. I don't, have a particular stake in like what choices people make or like how their birth goes, but it's about providing consistent support, providing full information so you have like the right, so you can make decisions about your body and like understand what's going on and, feel like supported and like someone has your back through the whole process. Cause I think that's what helps people into empowered parenthood. And just like having someone in your corner for all of it. Um, I have a good friend of mine phrased this well, and I kind of like, this is what I always come back to, that like midwifery is about the restoration of choice, bringing choice and autonomy and agency and respect back to pregnancy and birth. And it's done through relationship with my clients. It's done through informed choice. It's done through like slowing things down. And so there's like time to make decisions. And yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, creating a revolution in our life and society through birth.
And so I asked you a little bit about your natal work, but I also now need to ask you about your natal chart. What's your sun, moon, and rising?
I'm a Capricorn. I think it's very obvious to anyone who meets me. I've also had folks like tell me they were glad I was I'm like right on the cusp. I was born at like 11:55 a.m. on the cusp day in January, and I've had many people tell me they're glad I'm in a Capricorn, not an Aquarius, as a midwife. I'm like, okay, sure. I always get my rising and my moon confused. One of them is Taurus, the other is Aquarius. When I first was trying to figure that out, my partner's like, well, definitely Taurus because you're very stubborn. I was like, yeah, that's probably true. But I think, yeah, 100% Capricorn.
As a fellow Capricorn sun, I'm also glad to have you in the midst of Capricorn birth folks.
Yeah, just like extremely organized, regimented, with this like process that you cannot predict at all.
Yes, yeah. Like, no idea what's going to happen, but let me tell you, I have 36 plans already made, and we're going to just pick whichever one is, we're going to just keep switching them around till something works.
That is exactly true, yes.
What is your favorite thing about being a queer support person, a queer midwife, and or about working with queer and trans families?
I think it's just the way that I can provide culturally competent care. And it's like these like little things that, like you don't necessarily notice until you're in it, where like, I remember like, once like doing a postpartum visit for a family I had helped catch the baby of, that, we were just talking about like going through butch phases, when we were like teenagers, or just like, yeah, just having a provider that like, just like kind of gets it and like, like understands you, your family, your pronouns, like doesn't make like, yeah, there's just a lot of shared understanding, so you don't have to explain yourself, and like the way that leads to a more relaxed care experience, and ultimately like a better care experience because you're seen.
Absolutely, right. And then that time that is like not actually about like you trying to educate your provider about who you are, and it is instead about like, what do you need?
Yeah.
Wildly different experiences of care.
Yeah, for sure.
And relatedly, if you could improve one thing about the experience of trying to get pregnant, pregnancy, and birth for queer and trans families, what would it be?
That's a good question. I think like I have two-part answers. The first is like insurance reimbursement, because like our families are not recognized in the insurance structure, and they're not recognized in fertility treatments. They're not recognized in our care needs. Like, like trans people have a really, really high out-of-hospital birth rate, and then like out-of-hospital birth is like not well reimbursed. So again, like the options that we try and like seek out to like meet our care needs, and our unique family needs are only available to people with money, and typically like white people with money. And so I think like there's like the systemic like ways to like for our families to better be recognized in the insurance system, so we can access like the fertility support we need, access sperm, access like second parent adoption with a lot more ease. But then it's also just like, the real issue is lack of representation. Like, like if you're like pregnant people are assumed to be moms and their partners are assumed to be dads, and that's represented in pictures, in books, in literature, in like and providers' offices, and it is so ingrained. And like, and it's really, really hard to like figure out our own family narratives when we're not represented anywhere, and we're constantly having to translate stuff to like apply to us.
Yeah. And what is one piece of advice that you would give to a new or aspiring queer and trans birth worker?
I think linking up with other queer birth workers. I feel like I have been gay for a long time, and I have not, and in that time I've not always been a queer and trans confident birth worker.
Yeah.
Gender is so ingrained in pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. And I had to do a lot of unlearning. And really the best way to kind of continue to do that unlearning and like learn how to best serve my community is through the people who are already like leading this work. And like we're best able to like, we're like probably the best able to like meet our community's needs. And also like being queer is like not a given for being a queer competent or trans competent birth worker, for sure. There's a lot of extra work that needs to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And like so much of it is also right about like the stuff that like we have also then internalized about like our set, right. That it's also like, it's so, it like becomes so personal.
Yeah. Or like gender and babies. Like there's like, I constantly find myself at like growing edges where like I have a client using like they, them pronouns for their baby, and I like slip up on their pronouns like 5 or 6 times. And I'm like, what the hell? Like I have more work to do. And like, there's always more work to do. But it's like having the community both to learn from and like also to support me in continuing to do that work.
I think that like those communities both of support and accountability are so important.
Yeah.
And what is something not natal related or reproductive related about you and your life that you want to share?
I mean, I think my biggest like hobby or like side thing outside of midwifery is powerlifting.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, yeah, I've been like a gym bro for like many years. And now that like I can't go to the gym, yeah, now like a home gym bro, I guess. But yeah, it feels like a very different side of my life and personality, but is also like a very big part of my identity.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible. I mean, like, I feel like a similar type of intensity in like.
Yeah, I only do things that are intense. Like I don't really, like I knit, so maybe that's not intense, but like typically like it's kind of my
really like something that I can really go hard at.
Yeah. So, my best lift is bench, which I'm very proud of.
Incredible. Mm-hmm. And finally, where can people find you on the internet land?
Yeah, I think probably most people find me through Instagram. So my practice is Refuge Midwifery. It's just that on Instagram and Facebook. And it's been a really amazing tool for like connecting with like birth worker community, queer prospective parents, and just like trying to like continue to like build knowledge and power around like our families and birth justice. I do like an Ask the Midwife Everything Friday, some Fridays, and just like ways to like access midwifery care that doesn't involve hiring me as your home birth midwife. As a practice, I'm serving around an hour radius around Philadelphia for home birth and for doing home IUIs. And then I do also sometimes have folks who are outside my service area who just like want to do like preconception care with me because I'm good at helping people get off like gender affirming hormones to like create a pregnancy and just like want someone who's like, yeah, to help navigate that like knows the same language. And so and definitely the pandemic has opened that more. So I'm doing a lot more virtual care than I ever have before. So, and for that, you can find me on my website, which is refugemidwifery.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It was really wonderful getting to chat with you.
Yeah, thanks for asking me to do this. I'm excited for the resource that you're making.
All right.